Here, ever seen someone take an initiative and plan for the future? But you've seen me now, haven't you? I just bought a bunch of shares in 3D platformers, and in 19 years, 16-year-old me is going to be so proud. You know, I'm a wee bit disappointed. I just had a look at the stock exchange and 3D platforms the other day, and I didn't know ours could go so low. I'm broke, but I want to know what happened to my money first. So, to do that, we're going to have to look through a comprehensive history of 3D platformers.
What is a 3D platformer? Well, let me tell you, it's not even a genre, it's a subgenre of platformers in which you play as a character, usually a furry animal, in a 3D environment which you use your character's abilities such as jumping to traverse to their goals. Now, while a game may have platforming elements in it, this does not necessarily make it a 3D platformer, such as the parkour in Assassin's Creed. So with that dictionary definition out of the way, the first 3D platformer ever was Alpha Waves.
Wait, this is a game? I thought it was Germany's World War II radar system.
So Alpha Waves isn't anything in the way of looks or gameplay. In fact, if it wasn't the first 3D platformer ever, then no one would remember it or care about it. Yeah, that's right, Alpha Waves fans, I said it. Alpha Waves was released in 1990, so there wasn't another 3D platformer until 1995 with the PS1 launch title, Jumping Flash. And, well, in fact, this is a game, just not a great one. I mean, this could be to do with the fact that your animal mascot isn't furry in this game, but hey, who knows. The game was originally going to be called Springman, but Sony didn't want to associate themselves with Nintendo anymore, so they changed the name to Jumping Flash. Jumping Flash was well received when it came out for its graphics and unique 3D gameplay before everyone prominently forgot about it in 1996, only to remember it when it came back with the PlayStation Classic, when everyone was angry at this garbage being here instead of Crash and Spyro. One last notable point about Jumping Flash is that it's recorded in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first 3D platformer. Yeah, they said it, Alpha Waves fans. Now, what could that shadow have been that hung over Jumping Flash in 1996? Well, haven't you heard? It's Super Mario 64, one of the two launch titles for the Nintendo 64 that released in the UK on the 1st of March 1997. Yikes, the TARDIS must have been dreadful in 1996. The idea of a 3D Mario game had been around since Star Fox's production in 1993, but instead of making the game for the SNES, Shigeru Miyamoto decided to hold out for a stronger console. What is Super Mario 64 exactly? I mean, come on, we all know what it is. It's been talked about to death already. It was one of the most revolutionary games of all time, as it gave you big open worlds to explore for collectibles called stars, which allow you to progress on the other levels. When you collected a certain amount of stars, you do this through a series of platforming challenges to traverse around the level and nab the stars. Yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it? But you've heard it all before, but what you haven't heard before is someone say, yeah, I don't really like this game. And that person would be...
Me! Yeah, who would have known I'm so uncivilized?
Would be my excuse for disliking Super Mario 64? Well, it's a Mario game, of course. And I don't really like Mario platforming games in general. There's far better options in terms of 3D and 2D platformers in my opinion. I can tell they're good games, but that doesn't mean I'm going to like them. But what did Nintendo do with 3D platformers after they found out this new revolutionary genre? Yeah, I like Air 2 Nintendo. Considering that Nintendo were so heavily associated with the 3D platformer, you'd expect that they would have made more than 3 of them at the height of the genre's popularity in the 5th and the 6th console generations. They made a few 2D platformers that had 3D graphics, such as Yoshi's Story, but when 3 out of 3 of your 3D platformers are Mario games, well, you're lacking in variety, but no one will notice as they have more Mario taped to their face.
So this is what claustrophobia feels like. Can't really say I'd recommend it.
But the third parties picked up the support of the 3D platform on the Nintendo 64, and by third parties, I mean just Rare, as they were the only ones stupid enough to support this console instead of the PS1. But we might as well start off with the best of Rare's 3D platformers, being the Banjo and Kazooie games. Banjo and Kazooie started out as a pirate RPG for the SNES that was supposed to be graphically like the Donkey Kong Country games, but it got shipped to the Nintendo 64 before they realised that it was too ambitious for the hardware. Yeah, so ambitious that they had to wait 20 years for it to come out. Now that's what I call development hell. But they decided to fiddle around with the design for a bit and change the pirate into a bear called Banjo. When Rare got an early look at Super Mario 64, they decided to go down the route of making it a 3D platformer. And with that, the legend was born. Banjo and Kazooie is not just a 3D platformer, but a collectathon, a subgenre of 3D platformers. Wow, if it wasn't bad enough to be on the subs bench, but to be on the subs bench for the subs bench, that just must be sad. A collectathon's gameplay revolves around a character being in a bunch of big open worlds in which the main goal is to find a whole bunch of collectibles. In Banjo and Kazooie, your sister has been kidnapped by Gruntilda the Witch so that she can become beautiful. It is your job as Banjo and Kazooie to explore 9 worlds and search for Jiggies to progress through the castle and then beat Gruntilda. Banjo and Kazooie released in the UK on the 17th of July 1998. Its sequel, Banjo-tooie, released in the UK on the 12th of April 2001 and in North America on the 20th of November 2000. Really not prioritising your home country with these release dates, are you, Rare? The game had bigger worlds, thus being one of the first games to have fast travel, but focused less on collectibles, instead had a lot of mini-games, such as one where you used Kazooie as a gun. So much cooler than a Bernarda Silver Pigeon. Even Mumbo is playable. Could we have asked for more? We move on to another one of Rare's hits, Donkey Kong 64. We see it's another collectathon about a big brown bear, gorilla, called Donkey Kong, where your sister, friends, are kidnapped by a green witch, crocodile, called King K. Rool, and you have to find golden jigs, bananas, in order to explore new worlds, which will have to unlock to stop King K. Rool from blowing up their islands. Wow, those were some nitpicky similarities. But in actuality, the game is quite different from Banjo and Kazooie, with 5 playable characters being Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, Chunky Kong, Tiny Kong, and Lanky Kong. The game had so much content that it was the first game that required the Nintendo 64's console expansion pack. Many people complained about the amount of content due to there being 3,821 collectibles, but come on, that's nothing. In the Guinness Book of World Records, it says the game with the most amount of collectibles is Donkey Kong 64 with 3,821 collectibles. Whoops, never mind. Donkey Kong 64 was released on the 3rd of December 1990 in the UK. The last of Rare's platforming trio was Conker's Bad Fur Day, released in the UK on the 13th of April 2001, breaking all the laws of physics by having a 3D platformer with a cutesy animal that just screams lawsuits at Rare from lazy parents.
Yep, I've been wondering why it's been getting hotter.
It's got graphical violence, alcohol, smoking, and worst of all, outdated pop culture references. Of course it was going to fail being released so late in the console's life cycle, along with other things, but it was always destined to become a popular title. Sony, with the PlayStation 1, the console for older kids, and a less disturbing launch window between the UK and North America, took a look at these games and went, we need this, and created 2 3D mascots of their own. But first we need to talk about Croc, Legend of the Gobbles, which was released on the UK on the 10th of October 1997 for the PlayStation 1 and then later the Sega Saturn and only in the US, Microsoft Windows. Thankfully we didn't get that version. What's funny about this is that Croc was originally a game that was pitched to Nintendo by Agronaut Games called Yoshi's Racing. When Nintendo turned down the game, they partnered up with Fox Interactive to finance them instead. In the game, Croc is brought up by creatures called the Gobbles, who are locked up by Baron Dante, and if he's hunting them, then you know they're little devils. So it's Croc's job to free all the Gobbles. The gameplay though is just like a lot of other 3D platformers, not really anything special. It's more the journey than the destination with this one. But the real PlayStation goldmines are Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon. Now, while I'm not a big fan of either of these franchises, I have played the original trilogy, plus a few other of the Crash Bandicoot games, and I will say, I did enjoy most of them. So let's start off with the Crash Bandicoot series, which has been passed around developers more than a hot potato, with a whopping 16 studios that have made the games for the franchise, after Naughty Dog Studios had given Way of the Warrior to Universal Interactive when they were given the deal to make 3 more games onto them. In the move of the 2 developers, Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin, to their new headquarters, they created the idea for a 3D platformer game based on games from the 16-bit era. Because the player would always be looking at the back of the character, the game was given the title Sonic's Ass. That would have been stupid. Think of the cost of the licensing agreement. The character was originally called Winley the Wombat, before the marketing director begged it to be changed to something like Wizzy the Wombat, which sounds worse in my mind, before they settled finally on Crash Bandicoot. The story of the game is as simple as can be, with a character named Dr. Neo Cortex, big brain pun there, wants to destroy Crash as he is a failed experiment, while Crash has to stop him from taking over the world. But what makes Crash Bandicoot's gameplay unique is how it makes a 3D platformer so much like a 2D platformer with its level design. Heck, some of the levels are just basically 2D platformers with 3D graphics. With the levels, your objective is basically to go from point A to point B in a straight line. Exploration is actively discouraged because there's nowhere really to explore that often, but that's not a bad thing. Look at Super Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie and Spyro the Dragon. Now compare those to Crash Bandicoot. Which one's harder? Well, unless your opinion is wrong, you'll say Crash Bandicoot. No, this isn't because the game is not as well made or more unfair than the other games. Well, most of the time. With these other games, you're in big sandbox worlds, which give you many more ways to complete a task, which adds to the exploration that these games are trying to pull. The platforming is also easier, but that's not the point. The point is that because you only have one way to do one objective, more time can go into making that one route harder, while also being more fairly done. Unlike if you had to create 16 different paths in the one level, which leaves the game feeling more unique than any other one for its time. Spyro the Dragon being on the opposite side of the spectrum, being able to blend right in with any game from the Nintendo 64's platformers, well, only had more fur. When Sony seen this game that young, small Insomniac Games had developed, they got excited. They had already won the market for teens and adults, but Sony also wanted little kids, so this was their sweet treat to lure them from Nintendo, a game about a purple dragon, which was originally meant to be green, but used camouflage too well, which could have came in use if they wanted to be on the Nintendo 64, so they made him purple instead. Gameplay wise, you just go around levels, getting to fly or glide at some points, going around fighting evil and stuff like that. As you can see, this was more aimed for kids with the difficulty level, as there is none. But one pretty big revolution was the fact that enemies reacted to what the player did instead of having set patterns. But in the end, even though the Nintendo 64's controller is about as sturdy as a wet paper bag, it still sits atop the PS1 in terms of quality. Apart from these, there were many more great 3D platformers this time, such as Ape Escape, Rocket Robot on Wheels, and Space Station Silicon Valley, which IGN likes because you get to kill a lot of animals. Find your next topic of interest, PETA. A lot of other people point to Rayman as a great 3D platformer. I only played the third one, Hoodlum Havoc, and I didn't like it that much. The platforming is decent, but the idea to have such a focus on combat kinda ruins it. The only 3D platformer games that I've played that have such a large focus on combat that it works is the Ratchet and Clank franchise. One thing that's very surprising is the fact that only 2 franchises that were 2D platformers have returned as 3D ones, but in fact, most of these franchises did return, they just sucked. Alright, not all of these were bad. Bomberman 64 was pretty decent. Pac-Man World did its own thing even though it wasn't a 2D platformer to begin with, but nearly everything else was awful, such as Earthworm Jim 3D, Mega Man Legends, well honestly Bubsy was already terrible before Bubsy 3D. One noticeable exclusion was Sonic the Hedgehog, one of the 2 biggest characters of the 16-bit era, who was meant to represent how cool the Sega Mega Drive was, which is what the Saturn was the exact opposite of. There was a game planned for the Saturn called Sonic Extreme, but it fell through at some point, leaving people to have to wait until the 23rd of September 1999 here in the UK for the first 3D Sonic game, Sonic Adventure, which at the time was met with a
"Oh yeah, Sonic's back, baby!"
but nowadays is looked at as,
what is this, Sonic 06 Senior?
Yeah, the graphics are dated and the voice acting isn't the highest quality, but the fact that this had mainly fully voice acted cutscenes was amazing for the time. Plus, did any games have good voice acting at the time?
Shall we? Just a moment. I found something.
And the story, wow, is good. With 6 different characters that all have their own separate stories, but all have an impact on the main story, with each character being different gameplay-wise, have events portrayed in their own way depending on which character sees it. Every character is written amazingly, one of the best villains from a game, and people hate it for this, because what other Sonic game has such a large focus on story?
Sonic 06.
The gameplay added to this just completes the package, especially with the addition of the homing attack, which was really needed for a 3D Sonic game, as without it, combat and traverse would be so much worse, but because levels that you go through so fast are expensive, it's pretty obvious why there are so many more gameplay styles, and people still hate it for this too. Because what Sonic game has the most similar gameplay to Sonic Adventure?
Sonic 06, you really are starting to ruin a street cred now.
The sequel, Sonic Adventure 2, was released on the 23rd of June worldwide as a send-off to what would become Sega's last hurrah as a console manufacturer. This time, there were only 2 stories, but you were able to play as 3 characters in each, with just as good a story as the last time, gameplay which had been refined and include the fan favourite Shadow the Hedgehog, and he was hated also while being a fan favourite because he was edgy. And which game betrayed him as edgy?
Shadow the Hedgehog. You thought I was going to say Sonic 06, didn't you?
In Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Heroes, Shadow the Hedgehog is a pretty good character arc, and his game isn't that bad gameplay wise, but if we move over to Sonic's arch rival, Mario's platform, we see the only one of Nintendo's platformers that matter, Wario Land. But let's not spoil ourselves today by looking at Super Mario Sunshine instead, released on the 4th of October 2002 in the UK, making it the first time Mario hadn't been with the console from the start. And I haven't played it. I mean, what did you expect? I'm the guy who hates Mario. Now, I get the basic gist of it, how Mario gets a flyboard called Flood, which drastically changes the platforming and combat. Now if we go over to Sony, we see that they have their own 3 3D platformer legends being Jak and Daxter, Sly Cooper and Ratchet and Clank. If we start off with Jak and Daxter, I haven't played them either. I wonder, do I even play games anymore? You play as a human, elf, Saiyan, named Jak, and a rodent called Daxter, developed by Naughty Dog. That's all I really have to give without spoiling the games of myself, as I do mean to play them. But with Sly Cooper, we finally have one which I've played, thank goodness. Now I get to talk again. Well, the first thing that one would notice when looking at this game is how narcissistic the characters are in 3D platformers, and then how this game series developed by Sucker Punch Games has a focus on stealth. It's definitely not the best stealth I've seen, but it works well enough without taking away from the platforming. In later games as well, you get to play as his companions Bentley and Murray. Plus, this franchise's art style is gorgeous. When Sly Cooper is a child, he witnesses his family get murdered by Clockwork and the Fiendish Five, who also stole his family's thievious raccoons at the orphanage that he was put into. He became friends with a turtle named Bentley and the brains of the group, a hippo named Murray, who's the muscle and also the guy that drives the van. They seek out the pages from the thievious raccoonist while also being in the run from Inspector Carmelita Montoya Fox, Sly's love interest, whose voice goes through puberty in each and every game. Now, while Sly Cooper didn't do as well as Jak and Daxter and Ratchet and Clank in terms of money and sales, it is remembered alongside the two as PS2 legends. Plus, it got one more game than Jak and Daxter, but only Ratchet and Clank continue to dominate after the PS2, with 12 releases in the next 11 years, with the quality still being consistently good. In my opinion, it's the best video game franchise of all time. Being created by Insomniac Games, Ratchet and Clank is a third-person shooter platformer, being the only platformer which I've played with the focus on combat that actually works. Rayman. At first, the name of the game was originally Girl with a Stick. I can see it on the bestsellers list already. Chief Creator Officer Brian Hastings gave the idea of an alien that travels from planet to planet, collecting weapons and gadgets. Eventually, the alien was called a Lombax, called Ratchet, with a robot sidekick called Clank, before they were made equal in the game to become more of a body comedy. And the humour is something that these games do amazingly that still holds up, from the dialogue to the game titles. The stories, the characters are written so well, with new people met in each world, making it feel much more lived in, with classic characters such as Captain Quark, Nefarious and the Plumber, with so many fun weapons to use such as the Pyrociter or the Rhino. If I hadn't sold you on this franchise, then I really need to take a class on Skillshare and how to indoctrinate someone into a cult. But all these games are from big developers. There were plenty of small developers making games such as Chrome Studios with Ty the Tasmanian Tiger, being released on the 22nd of November 2002. This game has a special place for me, as it was the game I got with my first ever console I owned. It's a collectathon set in Australia, in which Ty the Tasmanian Tiger searches for Thunder Eggs to power a machine to be able to find all 5 talismans and beat boss Cass. Funny enough, out of all the platformers made by smaller teams, this one had quite a lot of success, with 3 sequels, but there were many more great 3D platformers from this generation that I haven't even mentioned, such as Sonic Heroes, Crash to Insanity, and iNinja. But one company that was one of the most important for the genre that was rarely seen being Rare. In 2002, Microsoft bought Rare as they had just entered the console market with the Xbox, and what they needed was some popular IPs. They looked at Rare and what they had done on the Nintendo 64 and went, here, if they're crazy enough to do this for Nintendo, then think of what they'll do for us.
Yeah, think!
When Rare were bought, people probably thought that something magical was going to happen. Well, I love to be a hardbringer, but the only noticeable thing that happened was Conker's Bad Fur Day got a remake. But do you really think people were going to be nostalgic over a game that was released 4 years ago? There's an untrue rumour that goes around about how Microsoft only bought Rare as they thought it would get them the Donkey Kong license. I mean, Microsoft's dumb, but not that dumb, but I still like to believe this. But just because Microsoft didn't make any progress in 3D platformers didn't mean that they didn't affect the genre at all. In fact, they were so salty that they didn't get the Donkey Kong license that they decided to ruin it with Halo, one of the 2 main reasons why 3D platformers died.
Ah, so another reason I can add to the folder of reasons why I hate Microsoft.
Halo was such a big deal because of the social aspect of it for one reason, even though internet speeds were garbage at the time. But it could be boiled down to how the game had much more of a mature tone, as people were sick of looking at these furry characters. They wanted men with guns whose favourite colour was yellow, but lived in a world of grey. Now, I haven't played the Halo game, but what I do know is that it didn't have an immediate effect on the death of 3D platforms, but it was massively influential for future shooters like Call of Duty. But a game that did have much more of an immediate effect was GTA 3. With the ability to explore and make your own fun and do whatever you want in a 3D realistic open world, instantly Everybody wanted to make games with big open worlds. 3D platformers even tried some of these tactics, such as Shadow the Hedgehog and Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 2 Bush Rescue, but these two incidents are well documented. But I believe that there is one more reason, a much more dark reason, a backstab from the platformers past. 2D platformers. Way back when 2D platformers were just coming into existence, the 2D platform was forgotten about. Sure, there were some who continued down this dark route, such as Rayman, but even he went to a 3D eventually. The genre was lost without anyone to stand up for it. That was until in the UK on the 30th of June 2006, the chosen one, who had brought 3D platformers into the spotlight, kicked them when they were down. Who was this Dark Lord? Why, none other than New Super Mario Bros. After what he did, the indies rose, each and every single one of them, a 2D platformer. And then the AAA studios let their franchises show their true colours. Donkey Kong and Rayman forgot how to walk around objects, and fallen heroes such as Rocket Knights arose again. And then, the foretold prophecy of 2D platformers, Resurrection, was completed.
Well, that prophecy was intense. It was so accurate to what actually happened that it could have just been written yesterday.
At this point, we reach the 7th generation of consoles, and the 3D platformers are all but dead. Ratchet and Clank and Mario are carrying the genre single-handedly, with Ratchet and Clank focusing more on story and Mario ditching sandbox gameplay in favour of linear levels, while also having to deal with whatever Sonic's doing. Crash and Spyro were not really helping, but not tripping them up either like Sonic, and Microsoft made sure if you hadn't moved on from 3D platformers, then you were in for even more depression. Companies made sure that they stayed far away from using the word platformer by substituting it with words like parkour, like in Assassin's Creed or Infamous, though neither of these games platforming was the core focus of. But even when a game called itself a platformer, it forgot to have a jump button. Skylanders. But then in 2016, the same thing that had happened to the 2D platformer happened to the 3D one. A remake based on the movie, based on the original Ratchet and Clank game on PS2, and a new Mario game that had opened sandbox worlds again was revealed and released in 2017, but most importantly was Yooka-Laylee. Developed by Playtonic Games, a studio that is made up from a bunch of people that worked on the Banjo and Kazooie games. Say what you want about the game, I didn't think it was as good as Banjo and Kazooie, probably because they were furthest, but I still enjoyed my time with it. But the game having been one of the most successful Kickstarter campaigns with over £2 million raised, it shows that the 3D platformers weren't dead yet. So then the big franchise came back with both Spyro and Crash Bandicoot getting their original trilogies remade to financial and critical success, which allowed them to make a sequel to the Crash Bandicoot franchise with Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time, which makes all the games apart from the first three just a really bad fan fiction. Apart from Twin Sanity, that one's still good. Sonic had another game which wasn't very good, and a 2D one that was very good, but that doesn't help my case at all. One which is a stretch on the concept of a 3D platformer is Snake Pass, because it's a platformer without a jump button. Wait, that's the reason I didn't put Skylanders on the list? Well, that's a bit hypocritical, I guess. I better put Skylanders on the list? Nah, no one will notice. But without a jump button, you have to throw all of your platforming wisdom out of the window. You gotta be the snake, you gotta feel the snake to win, which leaves you with a very unique and challenging platformer. Good job, Sumo Digital. So we're currently at a revival point for the 3D platformer with innovative titles such as Astrobot Rescue Mission, which is a VR game. We have plenty of other good indie games such as A Hat in Time that became a major success, and Punk and Jack looks good too. We're currently waiting on more big AAA games such as Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart coming out too. Even Microsoft, the ones who have been one of the big causes for the 3D platformer's demise, has tried this with Super Lucky's Tale and is helping in the production of a long-awaited title, Psychonauts 2. Who knows, we might even see a good Banjo and Kazooie game now that they've seen their popularity from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
So as you can see, the 3D platformer is making a comeback. It'll never reach the same heights of popularity that it once had, as the market's much more diverse and that's not how trends work. But I don't think it'll ever slip into obscurity again. And I've got to say, past me, you did a great job. We may have not hit it big like we once had hoped, but you taught me a very valuable lesson, and that is how to do stocks. And with this newfound knowledge, I have decided to get invested in the oil industry. I know, there is no way this could go wrong. Ah, the joys of never learning from your mistakes.